I used to think of our family as solid, like the old stone steps out front, worn but dependable. But I was wrong. Even stone cracks under enough pressure. That morning in March, I came home from my shift at the pharmacy, hoping for a quiet breakfast. I dropped my keys into the chipped ceramic bowl by the door and slipped off my sneakers, the soles already sticky with the city's spring drizzle. The house smelled faintly of burnt toast and last night's leftovers. I could hear Madison in the kitchen, her heels clacking against the tile with a rhythm that sounded like trouble. I should have known to turn around. Instead, I tiptoed in, careful not to disturb whatever storm was brewing. Madison stood by the coffee machine, scrolling her phone with one hand, the other wrapped around her favorite mug, the one with the faded yellow sunflower. "Did you finish the oat milk again?" she snapped, eyes narrowed before I'd even set my bag down. "I haven't been home since last night," I said, voice quiet. I started to reach for the bread, but her glare pinned me to the spot. She huffed, slamming the mug onto the counter. "You always do this, Emily. Never think about anyone else." It was always easier to let her be angry than to argue. Mom used to say, "Don't poke the bear." So I bit my tongue and waited. Madison circled me, her mood swinging like a wind chime in a thunderstorm. Linda breezed in, carrying a laundry basket full of half-folded towels. She barely glanced at us, just mumbled, "Girls, keep it down, okay," as if a gentle word could douse gasoline. Maybe if Emily actually did something around here, I wouldn't have to yell. Madison's voice rose higher. The coffee mug rattled dangerously close to the edge. "Madison, please," Mom said, but she didn't stop folding towels. Robert, hovering in the hallway with his coffee, peered over his glasses. "Let's not start the day off like this, all right?" His words had the weight of a feather. My hand shook as I tried to spread peanut butter on toast. The silence after Madison's outburst was heavy, stretched between us like a rope about to snap. She pushed past me and, in a flash of movement, flung the sunflower mug in my direction. It missed my head by an inch, shattering against the cabinet. Hot coffee splattered the floor. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Linda dropped her towels, exhaling in exasperation. "Madison, for heaven's sake, not the mug," she groaned, as if the mug mattered more than my racing pulse. "Nice going," Madison sneered, but her eyes darted, almost afraid I might finally raise my voice. I just stared at the shards on the floor, biting the inside of my cheek. The memory of every broken thing in this house, picture frames, promises, even the bathroom door with its patched-up crack, flashed before me. None of them ever really got fixed. "Clean that up," Mom said to me, already heading upstairs. Robert slipped away, coffee in hand, mumbling about work calls. I knelt to pick up the pieces. The coffee stung my fingers, but I didn't flinch. There was a routine to cleaning up after Madison: rinse the stain, throw out the shards, swallow the anger. Some days, I wondered what would happen if I simply left the mess. The morning crawled by in a fog. Madison stomped off, calling me pathetic under her breath. I could still hear the echo after she slammed her door. Alone, I wiped the counter and glanced at my reflection in the kitchen window. The bruise on my upper arm, hidden under my sleeve, was starting to fade from last week's fight over the TV remote. I pressed my fingers to it, more curious than hurt. Sometimes, I lost count of the aches. It was easier than explaining why they were there. I brought a frozen bag of peas to my arm and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the muted city outside. Philadelphia was waking up, car horns, the distant bell of the SEPTA trolley, neighbors calling to each other across narrow sidewalks. In that moment, I realized how small I felt in my own home, like a visitor who'd overstayed. Maybe every family has its broken places, I thought. but ours never even tried to repair them. It was like living inside a house where the walls shifted every night, where nothing ever settled, and you always had to watch for falling plaster. I don't know when I learned to hide my bruises. Maybe it was the first time Madison yanked me off the couch and Mom told me not to make a scene. Or maybe it was later, after I realized Dad's solution to conflict was to disappear behind a newspaper. I kept my sleeves long, my stories short, and my pain quieter than the clatter of Madison's heels. The day wore on. Madison didn't apologize. Mom acted like nothing happened, humming while she vacuumed. Dad retreated to his den, and I finished my chores without a word. Sometimes, it seemed like I was the only one counting the cracks in the foundation. That night, I lay awake listening to the creaks and sighs of the old house. The city lights flickered against the ceiling, and somewhere, Madison's music thumped faintly through the wall. I pressed my sore arm and wondered how much longer I could keep patching myself up, how many more breaks I could take before something inside me refused to mend. People say you can't choose your family. Maybe that's true. But you can choose how much of yourself you're willing to lose for them. And as the darkness settled in, I started to wonder what it would take to finally break me. If you walked into our living room, you might think we were a happy, ordinary family. The walls were lined with framed photos, most of them of Madison, Madison in her soccer uniform, Madison holding a spelling bee trophy, Madison posing with Mom at her high school graduation. My photos were there too, but usually tucked in the corners, smaller, faded by the sun. Madison always seemed to glow in Mom's eyes, like someone had switched on a spotlight just for her. I can't count the times I watched Mom fuss over Madison's hair, her clothes, her plans for the future, as if nothing Madison did could ever be truly wrong. That May, the weather in Philadelphia was finally warming up. Our old row house felt stuffy, sunlight pooling in the living room where Mom had opened every window. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone and looking up every few seconds to make sure Madison had enough coffee, enough advice, enough approval. Madison was on a roll. "I've got a lead on an interview at Redfield Publishing," she announced, tossing her hair over one shoulder. "They want someone fresh, with a great personality. Should be a perfect fit, right?" She flashed that winning smile, the one that made Mom melt. Linda nearly jumped off the couch. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. Did you send them your resume? Do you want me to press your blazer?" She rattled off a list of ways to help, none of which were ever offered to me. I hovered in the doorway, holding a letter from my college. The words "outstanding tuition" glared up at me in bold, red print. I needed another $200 by Friday, but I already knew better than to ask. Madison barely glanced my way. "Mom, can you spot me 20 for lunch with Chrissy? I'm meeting her to talk about the interview." Without missing a beat, Mom opened her purse and handed her a crisp bill. "Take what you need, sweetheart." It was my money. I recognized the bill from my envelope of savings, money I'd been squirreling away from every shift at the pharmacy. I had left the envelope in the kitchen drawer, thinking it would be safe. My throat tightened, but I just swallowed and forced a smile. Robert shuffled in, mug in hand. He looked at me, then at Mom, and back at the TV. "You two got plans for dinner?" he asked, but no one really answered. Dad tried, sometimes, to keep things smooth, but it always slipped through his fingers like sand. Later that day, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the near-empty fridge. Groceries had vanished, the last of my yogurt and eggs gone. I scribbled a shopping list I doubted anyone would see. As I cleaned up, I found myself drifting into old memories. Birthdays, for instance, how Madison's cakes were always 3 layers high, with candles that never blew out too soon. Mine were from the discount bakery, 1 candle if I was lucky. Madison's gifts were shiny and expensive, sometimes bought with money from the family fund that was always empty by the time my birthday rolled around. I remembered Grandpa Joe's voice from a video saved on my phone. He had a rough, scratchy laugh and a way of telling stories that made everything feel possible. "You keep your head up, Emily," he'd say. "There's a reason I left you those old keys. This house has more secrets than you think." Sometimes, I watched those videos late at night, just to hear someone believe in me. That afternoon, I heard Madison bragging on the phone to her friend, her voice floating down the stairs. "Yeah, Mom said I could take Emily's room if I get the job and need a quiet space. She won't mind, she always gives in." Mom appeared in my doorway holding an envelope. "Emily, can I borrow a little from your college fund for groceries? I'll pay you back when I can." She looked hopeful, but I could already tell the money was gone. I nodded, fighting back the urge to say no. "Sure, Mom. Take what you need." As evening fell, I found my parents whispering in the hallway. Their voices were low, urgent, unusual for them. I pressed my ear to the door and caught snippets. "Joe never meant for things to get complicated. She's just a kid, Robert. She can't handle the house, but it's in the will, Linda. We can't just pretend." Their voices trailed off when they realized I was near. I tiptoed away, heart pounding. For the first time, I wondered if maybe all those hints Grandpa Joe left meant something real. Maybe the house wasn't just another thing Mom could give away. That night, I lay in bed replaying birthdays, phone calls, and whispered arguments. Madison was the golden child, I was the afterthought, the backup plan. Still, something in Grandpa Joe's stories lingered, an ember of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't powerless after all. I pulled my savings envelope from my drawer, knowing it would be thinner now. The money wasn't the only thing missing, it was also the sense that my dreams belonged to me. But as I held Grandpa Joe's old keys, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time, possibility. People say families are built on love, but sometimes they're built on secrets and silent bargains. And sometimes, the only way to find your place is to look past the trophies and the old photographs and figure out what you're really owed. As the house creaked around me and the city cooled outside, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was meant to claim more than what was left behind. Some days slide by so quietly, you barely notice the cracks forming. But every fault line eventually shifts. I never thought a regular Thursday would leave me breathless on the kitchen floor. It was late summer, the sun already low and heavy, filling the kitchen with a tired golden haze. I'd just come home from class, my backpack heavy with borrowed textbooks and unopened bills. I was hoping for leftovers and a quiet evening, but the moment I walked in, I could sense the tension thickening the air. Madison's voice was sharp, already 2 notches too loud. "Where's my blue scarf, Emily? Don't pretend you haven't seen it." She blocked the fridge like a bouncer at a club. I sighed, dropping my bag. "I haven't touched your stuff, Madison. Maybe it's in the laundry?" She stepped closer, her eyes hard. "Don't play dumb. You always go through my things when I'm not home." "Madison, I'm not," but she cut me off, grabbing the counter as if it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Linda hovered by the sink, scrubbing at a plate that was already clean. Her mouth was a hard line, her eyes refusing to meet mine. I could feel my pulse start to race, a quiet dread unfurling in my stomach. Madison's anger felt colder than usual. She lunged suddenly, shoving me back. My elbow hit the edge of the table. I tried to keep my footing, but she was relentless. "Stop it," I gasped, struggling to break free. But she pressed her forearm against my chest, pinning me against the fridge. In the scuffle, my side slammed hard against the handle. There was a sharp, sickening crack, like a dry stick snapping in two. Pain exploded up my ribs and stole the air from my lungs. My knees gave out, and I slid to the floor, clutching my side, trying not to cry. Seriously? Madison huffed, stepping over me. You're so dramatic. Linda barely looked up from her dishes. Girls, enough, she snapped, more annoyed than concerned. Emily, get up. We have company coming over later. I tried to breathe, but every inhale sent white-hot pain shooting through my chest. Mom, something's wrong, I managed, voice trembling. I think I hurt myself. Linda sighed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Oh, please. You'll be fine. Take a Tylenol and stop making a scene. I tried to sit up, but the room tilted. The pain made my vision swim. Mom, please. She waved me off. Don't start. I don't need any drama tonight. I stared at her, unable to believe how little she cared. Madison rolled her eyes and disappeared upstairs, muttering under her breath about how I always ruined everything. The clatter of her footsteps was louder than my heartbeat. I managed to crawl to the kitchen chair, holding my side, trying not to sob. It felt like something inside me had splintered. Every breath was a battle. I wanted to scream, to demand that someone notice, but all I could do was gasp and bite my lip until I tasted blood. Linda returned to loading the dishwasher as if nothing had happened. Don't call the cops, Emily, she said, almost laughing. It'll ruin Madison's life. She's still applying for jobs. Don't be so dramatic. Her words sank in, heavier than the pain in my ribs. I wanted to argue, to stand up for myself, but I felt so small, smaller than ever before. I thought of all the times I'd been told to hush, to not rock the boat. Maybe that's why the boat kept sinking. Eventually, I made my way upstairs, one hand pressed to my aching side. My room was stuffy, the air stale. I collapsed onto my bed, struggling for shallow breaths, listening to the house around me, Madison's laughter through the walls, Mom's vacuum humming in the hallway. No one knocked. No one checked in. I was left alone with my pain, the dull throb reminding me that in this house, silence was the only answer anyone offered. That night, I lay awake, the pain radiating through my chest, hot and sharp. I pulled out my phone and, with shaking hands, took photos of the bruises forming along my ribs. I recorded a voice memo, my breathing ragged, just in case I needed proof. I stared at the ceiling, vowing that I would never let this go unseen again. People say family is supposed to protect you. But sometimes, family is just the first storm you have to survive. Pain does something strange to memory. Every detail sharpens, colors seem brighter, sounds more distinct. That's why, after what happened in the kitchen, I began documenting everything. In the pale morning light, I sat on the edge of my bed and peeled my t-shirt off with one hand, wincing at the purple and yellow bruise spreading across my ribs. I turned on my phone's camera, holding it at an awkward angle, and snapped photo after photo, front, side, close-up, timestamp. My breath sounded ragged in the quiet. For a moment, I paused, listening for footsteps in the hallway, but the only thing I heard was the hum of the neighbor's lawn mower drifting through the open window. I saved the pictures to a folder labeled insurance and started a voice memo, speaking softly, Thursday night. Sharp pain, trouble breathing. No one helped. I didn't know if I'd ever use these files, but Grandpa Joe's words played in my mind, keep your receipts. Sometimes, it's all you've got. Days blurred together, punctuated by sharp reminders of pain. Every movement made my side ache, but I went about my routine anyway, class, chores, even trying to smile for Linda and Madison. Mom seemed more impatient than usual, her eyes narrowed as if trying to read my mind. One evening, she hovered in my doorway, arms crossed. "You've been awfully quiet lately. Are you hiding something?" Her tone was more suspicion than concern. I shrugged, careful not to wince. "Just busy with finals. I have a lot on my plate." She sniffed, unconvinced, and left me alone. Madison, on the other hand, barely looked at me. If she felt any guilt for what she'd done, she buried it deep. On Saturday, I found myself at the urgent care clinic, clutching a borrowed credit card. The receptionist glanced at my ID, then at the bruise blooming beneath my collarbone. "Accident?" she asked gently. I nodded, voice flat. "I fell." She didn't push. The doctor was kind but brisk, ordering an X-ray and confirming what I already suspected, a fractured rib. "It'll heal, but take it easy. Ice, pain meds. And, if you ever feel unsafe at home, you can talk to someone here." He handed me a small card with a crisis hotline printed on it. I nodded again, tucking the card into my wallet. The bill stung almost as much as the injury, but I handed over the borrowed card without a word. Back on campus, I sat outside the advising office, hands curled around my backpack. The world felt huge, full of possibilities and dangers. My advisor, Ms. Green, spotted me and waved me in. She noticed my wince as I Saturday, "You okay, Emily?" I hesitated, then showed her my doctor's note. She read it, eyes softening. "You know, there are resources here for students dealing with difficult home situations. You're not alone, even if it feels that way. I can connect you with someone, if you want." Something in her voice, gentle, non-judgmental, made me feel seen for the first time in weeks. I took a pamphlet she offered, slipping it into my notebook. Just knowing help existed made the world feel a little less cold. That night, I returned home and retreated to my room, locking the door behind me. I scanned through my growing collection of evidence, photos, recordings, medical paperwork. The folder grew thicker, each file a quiet act of defiance. I backed everything up to a hidden cloud account, just in case. While searching for a blank sketchbook, I knocked over a shoebox of old papers. Birth certificates, faded family photos, tax forms, my life in cluttered stacks. Near the bottom, a large envelope with Grandpa Joe's looping handwriting caught my eye. Curious, I slid it open. Inside was an official-looking document, his will. My hand shook as I read, "To my granddaughter, Emily Carter, I leave the family home and its contents, to be claimed upon her 21st birthday." The signature was dated and stamped. I stared at the words, hardly daring to believe them. Mom had always said the house was hers, that Grandpa Joe left everything to the family. But here it was, in black and white, my name, my right. Everything clicked at once. The hushed arguments between my parents, the way Mom had started locking the mail drawer, the sudden urgency about family finances. All along, they must have known. I tucked the will deep into my notebook, heart pounding. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of power, a possible way out. Maybe I didn't have to stay trapped, patching up wounds and swallowing my voice. Maybe the house, my house, could be my exit. I didn't say anything to Linda or Madison that night. At dinner, Mom talked about rising grocery prices and Madison's next interview. I nodded at the right moments, hiding my secret like a spark beneath wet wood. Before bed, I opened Grandpa Joe's old message on my phone, listening to his gravelly laughter. "Don't let anyone tell you what you deserve, kiddo. Keep your receipts. People sometimes think evidence is only for the courts, but sometimes, it's what saves your sanity." I realized then that every photo, every file, was a piece of my story, the true story. And I wasn't about to let it be rewritten again. Madison's future depended on a lie. Mine, I realized, depended on telling the truth, even if it meant being the villain in her story. The air was thick with tension that morning at breakfast. Sunlight cut across the Carter dining room table, illuminating stacks of unpaid bills and a fading vase of flowers. Madison strolled in, practically glowing, wearing my grandmother's old necklace, the one Mom said looked better on her, as if my memories were just decorations for Madison to borrow. She was humming to herself, head high, eyes glinting with the promise of some fresh success. "Big day, huh?" Linda said, all honeyed encouragement. "Don't forget to bring your resume. And wear your blazer. You know, the one I pressed last night." Madison grinned, flashing perfect teeth. "Already on it. I have a Zoom with Redfield Publishing's HR at 10. If it goes well, I might even get to travel for them. Can you imagine?" She toyed with the necklace, her good luck charm, except it was supposed to be mine. Robert nodded, reading the paper, pretending to care. "We're proud of you, Mad." I sat across from them, picking at dry toast. I'd stayed up half the night, mind racing, thinking of the will in my notebook and the evidence quietly piling up in my cloud folder. Madison glanced at me only once, her lips curling in a secret little smirk. After breakfast, Madison left her laptop open on the table, the screen glowing with her resume and a half-finished email to HR. My eyes caught the details, references that didn't match, awards she never won, a summer internship she only claimed after she'd quit a week in. My fingers hovered over the keys. For a long moment, I hesitated. My pulse hammered. It would be so easy to walk away, to let her keep spinning stories while I faded quietly into the background. But a strange calm washed over me. Sometimes the only way out is to risk being the villain in someone else's story. Maybe it was time. I copied the files, snapping a photo of her references list with my phone. Then I logged into the campus library computer, my hands trembling but steady. I drafted a short email to Redfield Publishing's HR department. "This is hard to write, but as someone who knows Madison Carter personally, I feel compelled to share some information." Attached are files documenting patterns of violence, fraudulent references, and family history. I added the voice memo of Mom dismissing my injury, the medical report, and Madison's false internship claim, then pressed send. For a moment, I just sat there, heart pounding. The guilt was sharp, but so was the relief. I felt like I'd stepped off a cliff, not knowing if I would fall or finally learn to fly. The rest of the day blurred past. At home, Madison was on the phone, pacing, voice shrill. "No, I'm telling you, it's a mistake, someone's lying about me." "Why would they do that?" She slammed the phone down, stormed past me, and retreated to her room, door slamming hard enough to rattle the family photos on the wall. Linda followed, wringing her hands. "We'll figure this out, sweetie. Don't let one setback define you. You're stronger than that." I stayed in the hallway, invisible as always. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't sure if what I'd done was right or fair, but I did know I'd chosen myself for once. For the first time in a long time, I didn't shrink from my reflection in the hallway mirror. By evening, Madison's mood was a storm. She stomped downstairs, face pale, eyes wild. They canceled the interview. Someone sent them files, lies. "Do you know anything about this, Emily?" Her voice shook with rage. I met her gaze, steady. "No, Madison. I guess the truth has a way of coming out." For a moment, she looked like she might hit me again, but instead she just spat a curse and vanished into her room. Dinner was silent, everyone picking at their food. I kept thinking about the email, replaying every word. Had I gone too far? Had I finally broken whatever was left of our family? But then I remembered the bruise that still ached when I breathed, the money stolen, the late-night arguments about what Joe wanted. I remembered all the times I was told to hush for the sake of peace that never came. That night, Madison's rage simmered behind her locked door, a warning that the worst was still to come. I curled up with my notebook, staring at Grandpa Joe's will and the neat, careful signature that carried more weight than any family dinner or birthday wish. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Maybe the family would turn on me. Maybe I'd lose what little connection I had left. But deep down, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. I was done being the one who kept quiet. Sometimes, doing the right thing means stepping out of the story they wrote for you, even if it means you become the villain for a while. People say telling the truth will set you free. But nobody warns you about the storm that comes after. As I drifted off to sleep, a storm was indeed brewing. And for once, I was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. Some storms are silent until they suddenly swallow everything. In our house, it was almost a relief to see the tension crack open at last. By late November, Philadelphia was colder than I remembered, the kind of cold that settled in your bones and wouldn't let go. The Carter house felt emptier, too. Corridors filled with boxes, taped-up memories, the smell of packing tape lingering in the air. Every day, I packed a little more, sketchbooks, old letters, even the ugly ceramic rooster Mom insisted belonged on the kitchen counter. But for all that, no one talked about what was coming. Instead, the air pulsed with unspoken accusations and unfinished goodbyes. The confrontation started quietly at first. Linda would corner me in the hallway, voice trembling between pleading and warning. "Emily, you don't really want to do this. This is your family. We can talk it through, can't we? You're tearing us apart." Robert tried a gentler approach, slipping me notes in his shaky handwriting. "Maybe you could reconsider. Maybe this will all blow over if you just let it go." I remembered what Grandpa Joe used to say, sometimes, you have to lose everything to finally start living. I'd lost enough already, my peace, my savings, my sense of safety. It was time to stand up for myself. Madison, meanwhile, cycled between fury and desperation. One moment she was shouting, the next begging. "You're ruining my life, Emily. Do you even care? I won't have anywhere to go. Please, just say you made it all up, and I'll forgive you." Her voice cracked, but I saw the old calculation in her eyes. I felt a twinge of sorrow, but I didn't back down. The evidence was all there, photos, medical reports, the will. My life, documented in shadows and signatures. I filed the legal paperwork, then printed out the eviction notices Grandpa Joe's lawyer had sent me. One by one, I handed them over, the papers trembling only a little in my hands. The chaos erupted on a Thursday night. The four of us gathered in the living room, the walls echoing with old resentments. Madison hurled blame at me, voice raw with rage. "This is all your fault. You're obsessed with being the victim. You're tearing this family apart for what, some old grudge?" Linda stood by her, crying silent tears. "We were happy until you started this," she whispered, "can't you see that?" I swallowed hard, but I refused to retreat. "No, Mom. You were comfortable. There's a difference. I was never safe here." Robert stared at his hands, saying nothing. In that moment, I realized he'd chosen silence over standing up for me long ago. Madison, unable to find any leverage left, tried once more to scare me. She stormed across the room, hands balled into fists. "I swear, if you don't stop this right now." I stood my ground. "If you touch me, I will call the police." My voice came out stronger than I felt. She sneered, her anger like a wild thing, and for a heartbeat I thought she might actually hit me. Instead, she swept a lamp off the table, sending it crashing to the floor. Shards scattered across the rug. For a moment, everything was still, then I reached for my phone, hands shaking but steady. I dialed 911, my thumb sure on the keys. "My sister is threatening me. She's out of control." Linda sobbed, "Please, Emily, don't do this, it'll ruin her future." But I knew better now. I knew that the cost of silence was always paid by the one who stayed quiet. As the sound of sirens grew louder outside, Madison finally backed away, her bravado crumbling. Robert leaned against the wall, pale and hollow-eyed. I stood in the hallway, heart hammering, the chaos swirling behind me. For the first time, I felt the shift, no longer a victim, but someone who had survived. Someone who'd drawn a line and refused to be crossed again. As the officers took statements and the front door swung open to the cold, I thought of Grandpa Joe's words, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to finally start living." I'd lost a family, at least the version I'd grown up with. But I was still standing. And somewhere beyond the flashing red and blue, I could almost see the outline of a new life waiting for me, just beyond the front steps. The night my family left, the silence rang louder than all their shouting ever had. Even with the boxes stacked by the front door and the cold wind slipping under the doorframe, I couldn't quite believe it was real. For so long, our house had been filled with noise, arguments echoing down the hall, doors slamming, someone always demanding, always taking up space. Now, it was just me and the shadows. Winter had settled in, wrapping Philadelphia in a blue-gray hush. The moving truck idled outside, headlights cutting through the dusk. Madison was the last to come down the stairs, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, jaw clenched tight. She tossed a glance at me so sharp it almost hurt, then stalked out without a word. I heard her muttering to Linda on the porch, but the words were lost to the wind. Linda followed, red-eyed, clutching a wrinkled box of old family photos. She paused in the entryway, looking at me like she wanted to say something, but instead she just shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Take care of yourself, Emily," she whispered. Her voice was small, tired, so different from the mother who'd once filled every room with certainty. Robert was already outside, standing by the truck, hands jammed deep in his coat pockets. He didn't meet my gaze as I handed over the last folder of legal papers and the house keys. His nod was the barest acknowledgement, a punctuation at the end of a long, unspoken sentence. When the truck finally pulled away, I stood in the doorway, the cold biting at my ankles. Their departure should have felt like a victory, but I only felt hollow. My hands trembled as I locked the door, the final click echoing through the empty halls. I walked through the house, each step tracing memories that clung like dust. The living room, stripped of furniture, was just a rectangle of faded carpet. Sunlight filtered in through half-open blinds, illuminating the outlines where photos used to hang. In the kitchen, a single mug sat abandoned in the sink. I ran my finger along the countertop, remembering years of rushed breakfasts, raised voices, broken promises. Every room told a story, but now the pages were blank. Upstairs, Madison's door was open, her old perfume lingering. On the bed, she'd left a note. The handwriting was rushed, angry, letters pressed so hard they nearly tore the paper. "You think you've won, but all you did was destroy this family. Don't expect forgiveness. I hope you're happy alone." Beneath the bitterness, though, I heard the break in her voice, the fear, the sadness, the exhaustion we'd all carried for too long. I folded the note and set it on her dresser. I wasn't angry. I just felt the finality of it, like the last light going out in a house after a long party. In the quiet that followed, I wandered room to room, letting the emptiness settle. I'd expected relief, and it was there, somewhere under the ache. The weight on my chest was different now, not fear, but the unfamiliar pressure of freedom. I made tea in the kitchen, the old kettle whistling shrilly in the stillness. I sat at the table, cupping the warm mug in both hands, and listened to nothing but my own heartbeat, the soft hum of the radiator, the city moving on just outside my window. It's strange how loss and hope can fit in the same breath. I'd given up so much, my family, my childhood, the dream of fixing what was always broken. But now, for the first time, I could decide what came next. I wandered back to the front door and stood in the threshold, watching the street lamps blink on. The wind tugged at my hair, and I wrapped my arms around myself, half shivering, half smiling. I thought of Grandpa Joe's words, "Peace isn't always quiet, it just means the fighting is over." In that moment, I believed him. There was an emptiness in the house, yes, but it was also an open space, a clean slate. As darkness pressed in, I leaned against the doorframe, feeling my own heartbeat thumping steady and strong in my chest. For the first time in my life, the next step was mine to choose. For the first time, I could breathe without glancing over my shoulder. The quiet in the Carter house wasn't heavy anymore, it was fresh, a space for something new to grow. The chill of winter lingered, but sunlight slanted through the windows, warming patches of bare floor and casting hopeful stripes along the walls. I spent the first few days after everyone left in a kind of daze. At first, I didn't know what to do with the silence, the rooms echoing back at me when I coughed or laughed or just muttered to myself. But slowly, I found comfort in it. I could move through my home at my own pace, unhurried, unafraid. One morning, I pulled the last of the heavy curtains down from the living room windows. Dust spiraled in the sunlight. The walls beneath were yellowed and dotted with old nail holes, places where family photos had hung for decades. I found a roller and a can of pale blue paint, and as I swept the color over the stains, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself with every stroke. The chemical tang of new paint mingled with the crisp winter air. I left the windows open to let it all drift away. I started making lists of small projects, clear out the closets, donate old clothes, patch the crack in the hallway ceiling. I moved the tired armchair from the corner, dragged out boxes of things no one had touched in years. Each chore gave me a tiny spark of pride, my hands, my choices. One afternoon, after a morning of hauling broken furniture to the curb, I treated myself to a pastry from the cafe on the corner. The barista, Tracy, recognized me from my occasional visits and greeted me with a warm, easy smile. "Trying something new today?" she asked, sliding a blueberry scone across the counter. "New seems to be the theme lately," I said, laughing. For the first time in months, it sounded like my own voice. We chatted about the weather, books, and what it was like to finally have a house to yourself. Tracy had a gentle way about her, never pushing, just listening, always ending conversations with a little encouragement. "You'll be amazed what you can build once you have your own space," she said, tucking a napkin beside my cup. Back home, I rearranged my bedroom, moving my old art supplies out from under the bed. They'd been gathering dust for years, a reminder of things I once loved but never dared to pursue. Now, the pencils and paints looked like invitations, possibilities instead of failures. I decided to turn Madison's old room into a studio. The walls were still painted a harsh, stubborn pink from her teenage years. I covered them with clean white primer, then soft gray. I set up a folding table by the window and organized my brushes in mason jars. Sunlight poured in each morning, illuminating the little sanctuary I'd built for myself. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. With each day, I found satisfaction in routines I created: morning coffee with a book, evening walks around the block, a nightly cup of chamomile tea. I tried new recipes, lit candles for no reason, let music play as loud or as soft as I wanted. I planted a pot of basil on the kitchen windowsill and grinned as the first green shoots broke through the soil. Some nights, the loneliness crept in. I'd miss the noise, even the chaos. But then I'd remember the peace Grandpa Joe talked about, not the absence of sound, but the feeling that no one would hurt me here. That was worth everything. One Friday, while cleaning up the kitchen, I checked my email on a whim. There, buried among junk mail and newsletters, was a message from the university: your deferred scholarship offer remains open for fall admission. Please let us know if you're interested. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Could I really go back? Was it too late to pick up where I'd left off? I thought of the art studio, the sunlit mornings, the freedom of deciding for myself. Maybe this was the next step. I closed my laptop and glanced around at the house, still a little empty, still a little rough, but getting brighter every day. With a small smile, I realized I was ready to say yes, not just to the scholarship, but to myself. As the city lights blinked on outside, I pulled out my sketchbook and started to draw, letting hope fill the page with every careful line. I was finally free to choose what came next, terrifying and wonderful, all at once. My new art studio became the heart of the Carter house. In the soft gray mornings, I'd open the window and let the cool air fill the room. My brushes, pencils, and paints lived on the table by the window, always within reach. Some days I spent hours sketching the world outside, the stoop across the street, the city pigeons perched on telephone wires, the sunlight melting the last of winter from the rooftops. The scholarship email had ignited something inside me, a mix of excitement and fear. I read and reread it, my heart fluttering with every word. Was I really ready to start again? Could I step into a new world and leave my old pain behind? Tracy noticed my nervous energy when I stopped by for coffee. She poured an extra shot of espresso into my cup and leaned across the counter. You got good news, didn't you? I smiled. Sort of. The university offered me another chance. I haven't filled out the forms yet. It's a lot. She grinned, warm and steady. Just take it one step at a time. Nobody says you have to have it all figured out on day one. With her encouragement echoing in my ears, I sat at my kitchen table that afternoon and opened the university's application portal. My fingers trembled as I typed. The portrait of Grandpa Joe hung nearby, his smile captured in faded sepia. It almost felt like he was rooting for me as I filled out page after page, transcripts, personal essays, proof of residency. I scheduled a campus tour. The university was a sprawling maze of old brick buildings and budding magnolia trees, students darting between classes, laughter rising up from the quad. I felt like a ghost at first, slipping unnoticed through the halls, but soon I realized I belonged here, too. My admissions counselor, Ms. Bennett, greeted me in her office, her desk cluttered with student art projects and mugs with witty quotes. Welcome, Emily. I read your essay. You have a voice, we want you here. Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. She talked me through financial aid options, scholarships I hadn't even known existed, and gave me the forms for additional support. And remember, she said, ask for help. There's no prize for doing it all alone. Back at home, I started pulling together a portfolio of my artwork, sketches, paintings, digital pieces. Tracy came over to see the progress, bringing her favorite chocolate croissants. Look at all of this, she beamed, spreading the drawings across my kitchen table. You should be proud. Most people never get this far. No one had ever cheered me on before. For years, I'd hidden my art, afraid it wasn't good enough, afraid it would be dismissed like so many of my dreams. Now, every encouraging word built me up in ways I'd never imagined. I found myself working longer hours, exploring new techniques, and trusting my hands again. As I submitted my final paperwork, my heart beat so hard I thought I might faint. Hope and fear were tangled together, buzzing in my veins. What if they changed their minds? What if I failed? But late that night, as I checked my email one last time before bed, a notification flashed across my screen. Congratulations! Welcome to the School of Art. For a moment, I just stared, unable to believe it was real. Then joy broke through, a bright, full-bodied laugh that echoed through the quiet house. I was in. I'd done it. The sense of accomplishment felt foreign but good, like a new coat that actually fit. Everything was changing. The Carter house wasn't just a place of memories and ghosts anymore, it was becoming a launching pad, a home base for something new. That evening, I sat in my art studio, the last light of day glinting off Grandpa Joe's frame, and let myself dream without limits. The future no longer looked like a blank wall. For the first time in my life, it looked like a canvas. On my first day of class, I wore the necklace Grandma had left me, a quiet promise to myself that I was worth this new beginning. The silver chain felt cool against my skin as I zipped my jacket and stepped into the brisk September air, heart pounding louder than the city traffic. Campus was alive with motion and noise. Students lugged backpacks across the quad, voices rising in a jumble of hellos and directions. I tried to blend in, but every face seemed to know exactly where they were going except for me. My hand shook as I clutched my orientation packet, and for a moment, I remembered the days when even dreaming felt dangerous, when every ambition had to be tucked away in the corners of my mind, out of sight. The university's main hall smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. At the welcome desk, I spotted Ms. Bennett, who greeted me with a reassuring smile. "Glad you made it, Emily. Let's get you settled." She showed me to my new dorm room, small but bright, with a narrow bed, a desk by the window, and just enough space for my sketchbooks and art supplies. For the first time, a room was truly mine. Later, during orientation, I found myself next to a guy with kind eyes and a pencil behind his ear. "You lost too?" he grinned. I laughed. "Is it that obvious?" "Don't worry," he said, introducing himself as Jamal. First day jitters are basically required. We struck up an easy conversation, joined by Priya, whose laugh was infectious and who talked about painting murals back in her old neighborhood. Over coffee in the new campus cafe, we shared our favorite artists, swapped stories, and made a pact to push each other to try new things this year. Even so, old insecurities clung to me like a second skin. At times, I worried I was an imposter, someone who had just stumbled into a life she didn't deserve. Tracy checked in by text almost every day. "Remember, you earned your place. Proud of you." Her words grounded me, especially on nights when I lay awake in my dorm bed, doubts swirling like leaves outside my window. My art classes were challenging, exhilarating, and at times, terrifying. In my studio course, Professor Alvarez assigned us a group show at the student gallery. I nearly backed out, convinced my work would look childish next to everyone else's. But Jamal and Priya wouldn't let me. "We've seen your stuff, Priya said. It's honest. That's what matters." On the night of the show, my heart hammered as I hung my paintings along the white walls. Each brushstroke felt exposed, every memory painted into the canvas: Philadelphia rooftops, the old Carter house, even the outline of Grandpa Joe's weathered hands. As the crowd drifted through, Professor Alvarez stopped at my piece, a cityscape with threads of gold woven through the sky. He turned to the group and said, "This is extraordinary work. It tells a story and invites us in. Well done, Emily." The words lit something inside me I'd never felt before, pride that didn't come with guilt. Afterward, Jamal clapped me on the back, and Priya hugged me tight. "First of many," she promised. As I was cleaning up that night, I checked my phone and froze. A friend request from Madison. A message, "Can we talk?" For a long time I just stared at the screen. My stomach twisted, memories flooding back, old wounds pulsing beneath the surface. I didn't answer. Not yet. For now, I let myself feel proud. I'd crossed so many boundaries to get here, and this was my moment. That night, lying in my dorm bed, I thought about forgiveness, not for Madison, not yet, but for myself. For all the years I doubted my worth, for every time I let someone else define me. I fell asleep with the necklace around my neck, the city's lights blinking outside, and the quiet, persistent hope that I was finally, truly beginning again. You can forgive someone without letting them hurt you again. I learned that the hard way, one careful step at a time. It was Tracy who said it best, over coffee in our usual spot on 10th Street. She stirred her tea, watching steam curl between us. "Family is complicated," she said. "But your story belongs to you now." Her words landed with a gentle weight, reminding me that it was okay to set boundaries, maybe even necessary. Madison's message had sat in my inbox for days before I answered. "Can we talk?" The words were short, almost timid. Old fear prickled at the back of my neck, but curiosity, and maybe hope, kept me from deleting it. We agreed to meet in a crowded cafe near campus, where the hiss of espresso machines and the murmur of conversation would offer a buffer. Madison arrived late, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Her voice wavered as she sat down. "I'm not really sure how to do this," she admitted, twisting her napkin. I let her talk. She started with excuses, how things got out of hand, how pressure at home made her lash out. She blamed our parents, the city, her friends. Only near the end did she whisper, "I know I hurt you. I'm sorry, Em. I wish I could take it back." I felt the old ache, the urge to fix everything, to absorb her pain. But I held my ground. "I forgive you, Madison. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to let you in right away. I need time, maybe a lot of it. I hope you find peace, but I have to take care of myself now." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. For the first time, she looked small, like the sister I remembered from years before all the anger. Back at school, I found support in new places. Jamal and Priya met me at the art studio to help with my next project. We worked late into the evening, laughing over spilled paint and tangled headphones. When I faltered, afraid my work wasn't good enough, Jamal nudged my shoulder. "You made it here, Em. That means you can make it anywhere." Linda and Robert sent a letter, real paper, real ink, asking if we could meet. They wanted to talk, to explain, maybe to start over. I read it twice, heart heavy, and put it aside. Some bridges take time to rebuild. Some you choose not to cross again. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the library windows, Priya found me lost in thought. "It's okay to miss what could have been," she said softly. "But you're allowed to move on. You're allowed to be happy." Her words helped. I learned to sit with the messiness, the sorrow and relief mixed together, the longing and the pride. It wasn't easy, but I was no longer alone with it. Then came unexpected good news, an email from the City Gallery. "We're pleased to inform you that your piece has been selected for the upcoming New Voices exhibition." My breath caught. It wasn't just my friends who saw my worth now, the world was beginning to notice, too. That night, I stood in my art studio, staring at the painting they'd chosen, a city skyline stitched with gold, threads of hope connecting rooftop to rooftop, darkness breaking open into dawn. It was a map of where I'd been, but more than that, a vision of where I was going. As I cleaned my brushes and packed my bag, I realized forgiveness wasn't a single act, but a journey, one that belonged to me alone. The bridges I built now were sturdy, honest, shaped by my own hands. Family, I learned, is complicated. But this story? This story is mine. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real, and for the first time, it was all for me. Standing in the bright, echoing gallery, I felt almost weightless. My painting hung on the wall, catching the soft spotlights, gold threads winding through city rooftops, each one a quiet celebration of everything I'd survived. People mingled, pausing in front of my work. Some nodded in understanding, others smiled and asked gentle questions. It was a small crowd, but their approval felt larger than any family gathering I'd ever known. Tracy was the first to hug me, her laughter ringing out as she squeezed my shoulders. "Look at you, Emily," she said. "You did it. You really did." Jamal and Priya arrived next, arms full of flowers and bakery boxes. "To our favorite artist," Priya toasted, handing me a cup of lemonade. Ms. Bennett stopped by, her eyes shining with pride. "You've come a long way, Emily. I hope you know you belong here." Later that week, graduation day arrived, warm and blustery. I wore the silver necklace Grandma had left me, her silent promise resting just above my heartbeat. The university's green lawn buzzed with celebration as my name was called. I crossed the stage with my head high, the cheers of friends echoing in my ears. No one from my old family was there, but I didn't feel empty. For once, the people who mattered most surrounded me, not because they had to, but because they chose to. After the ceremony, we gathered on a city rooftop to watch the sun dip behind the skyline. The air was fresh and electric. I held my diploma in one hand, a glass of ginger ale in the other, and took a long breath, filling my lungs with something like peace. My phone buzzed. A call from Mom. I stared at the screen, the old ache flickering in my chest. I let it ring, then gently pressed decline. Some wounds are better left closed. Tonight, I chose peace, mine. Tracy clinked her glass against mine. Here's to new beginnings. Jamal leaned over the railing, grinning at the lights. You ever think about how far you've come? I did. I remembered every night I'd spent doubting myself, every bruise, every voice telling me to stay quiet. Now, my art spoke louder than all their words. In every painting, I'd poured my fears and hopes, letting the colors claim the story I'd once tried so hard to erase. We laughed and shared stories until the city lights blinked on below. I thanked each of them, Tracy, Jamal, Priya, even Ms. Bennett, for seeing me, for holding up mirrors that reflected the best parts of who I could be. Later, when everyone had gone, I lingered on the rooftop, cool wind brushing my face. I opened my sketchbook and found a fresh, blank page. The paper seemed to glow beneath the city sky. This ending, I realized, was mine to write. Not just the end of a chapter, but the start of something entirely new. For the first time, I felt wholly, wonderfully myself, unafraid of empty spaces or beginnings. As I traced a line across the page, I smiled. I wasn't alone. I wasn't broken. I was free. And whatever story came next, I knew I'd be the one to tell it. Looking back on this journey, I realize the applause that truly matters is the quiet kind, the kind that comes from standing up for yourself and finding your own peace. Sometimes, it takes walking away from old pain to discover the love and kindness waiting on the other side. Life has shown me that family isn't always defined by blood, but by those who cheer for you when you finally step into your own light. If my story resonates with you, I hope you'll share your thoughts or experiences below. We all have chapters still to write, and sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is turn the page. Thank you for being here with me.